Now you're recording.
Good day. Good day. This is Reverend Deborah Johnson, and welcome to this open and drop-in series that we've been doing that I'm so excited about for such a time as this, advanced spiritual skills building for societal oneness. We have people who are with us in the room here with me. We have people who are online. We have people who are also calling in, and this is great. I'd like to do a couple of check-ins as we get going here. I'm going to throw it open to people who are in the room first, and I want you to say upon what spiritual authority are you here doing this work. Let's get 2 in this group. We're going to get 2 virtual and a couple on the telephone as well. So who would like to say what it is? Okay, give us your name and what it is.
I'm Milo, and the authority that I stand on is my remembering the future where we are socially one, in the oneness, and I'm standing in that.
Okay, all right. Somebody else. What authority are you standing on to do this work? Okay, give us your name.
My name is Kim, and I am a divine child of God, and I am called to be here in this place, in this time.
Amen.
All right.
So I'm
Okay, so let's go virtual. Some people who are on the computer, on your computers. Okay, so I've got a wave there from Elizabeth. So give us your name, where you are calling in from.
Yeah, I can see that I need to put on some lighting. I am Elizabeth, and I'm calling in from Norway.
All right. And what is the spiritual authority upon which you're standing to do this work? What gives you the right to do this work?
Yeah, I am a divine emanation, expression of the divine, of God. So I am God in action, expression. Yeah.
Great. Very good.
Esperanza is on chat.
Okay.
She says her spiritual authority is her divinity, love, compassion, and peace is upon what she stands.
All right. Very good. Is there anybody else who's virtual or on the telephone that wants to say upon the authority that you do this work? I guess I can't see who all is virtual.
This is it. There's a phone number, 510-394-8345.
That's confusing.
Oh, okay. And this is it, virtually.
Okay, was it something I said?
all invited.
Was it something I said? Okay. Well, today we're going to go a little bit deeper in where we've been, and then we're going to start wrapping it back around to some more like overtly spiritual concepts. So we have been talking a little bit about U.S. history. And why do you think I asked you to first identify the spiritual authority upon which you stand? What is it about? I mean, that's been an ongoing something that we've been doing. Why is that so important? Why is it so important? Somebody in the room. Let Kaylee answer it.
If you were trying to do this with your human self, you get overwhelmed really fast.
Okay.
And when you stand big and powerful, that's when we come together as big, powerful beings that we can make a difference. But I think individually as humans alone, we're too puny.
Yes, that's a big part of it right there. Why else? Why else is it important? Tell me.
I think it's important because it's what God wants to do and how, as you were trying to tell us that I'm learning a lot from this myself. But I thought I was kind of good, but it's really has learned a lot. We're proud to be here to be able to.
Yeah. We need to get our egos out the way. You know, it's really what it boils down to. Is that is that, Nate, can you do the swing monitors? Thank you.
Thanks.
It's really important that we transcend our egoic needs. Because otherwise we start, you need to be over here because you're in the way. You need to sit over here. When you get into, if you try to do it on your own, you're likely to get on what we call the triangle, the victim, villain, hero triangle. And we get into this do-gooder mentality, and we're going to be the hero, and we come into the work with an agenda. And when you come into the work with an agenda, we're less teachable. We're less teachable, and we can't see quite as clearly. We get overwhelmed by what it is that's going on. I love the way that my mentor Beck puts it, that pain pushes until vision pulls. If we allow ourselves to be pulled by a vision, that vision is transcendent. These are the two questions that we started with, and they're the two questions that you always need to come back to. What is your vision? What is your vision? Not just what do you not want to see happen, but what do you want to see happen? What is this? And we are here collectively creating a new vision. It is important to know that we are standing upon spiritual authority, to know that we do have the power to create. We can do that. And that's what we are doing here. So for the past couple of sessions, we've been looking at a particular moment in U.S. history that's a real definitive moment, and I think kind of says it all. We've been taking a look at a Supreme Court decision called the Dred Scott decision. Now, part of the reason why this is so important, and it says it all, is that this is a decision that was made in 1857. It was the result of a court case where a slave was suing in U.S. courts for his freedom, based upon the fact that he had lived with his owner in certain non-slave states, including some states that were in new territory that had not been part of the original 13 colonies. What the Supreme Court justices did is they did a thorough analysis and assessment of not only national law, but state law as well, to try to determine not only did he have a right to be free, but was he in fact a U.S. citizen? Even if he was free, was he a U.S. citizen? Essentially is what we call, did he have standing? Did he have a right to even be in the court in the first place? It also took a look at this idea of these other territories and whether or not they could have slavery. In an opinion that was pretty close to unanimous, 7-2, I've never heard an opinion that was so definitive in the eyes of the courts. It wasn't their own opinion exclusively. But what they said was that when they looked at the course of U.S. history, it became really apparent that there was never, ever the intention on the part of the founding fathers or on the part of anybody who was working with our Constitution for people of African descent to ever be citizens of the United States. That what they concluded pretty definitively is that the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution itself, and all of the laws and all of the protections under the laws were really designed to be for the white race. Just take a breath for a moment. Everybody who's listening is now just like take a breath. The only way we can really get to the sense of oneness is we have to end the sense of supremacy. Most of us are trying to get to oneness just by ending marginalization and discrimination. But the marginalization and the discrimination is not a goal in and of itself. It's not the end, it's the means to something else. And as long as we stay in denial about the fact that this is the way that this nation was built, we're never going to be able to do anything about it. part of this course is about learning how to dismantle the isms. And the isms always have two components. They have an attitudinal component, which is the idea that there's some kind of inherent differences between these groups, and that this difference being inherent and being so great is the justification for why the group should not be treated the same. That's the underlying basis. Then that's coupled with this process of institutionalization. It's coupled with the process of taking that prejudgment that these groups are not deserving to be treated because of their nature, whatever that nature is, and feed that into all the different institutions within the society. So it keeps reinforcing itself over and over again. So the beauty of this particular case is that it shows it so explicitly. It shows how the ism is based upon the notion of a supremacy. It shows very clearly this idea of these innate differences. And it shows very clearly what happens when you take that idea of the individual prejudice and supersize that to the collective level and then weave it into all parts of the society. It becomes the perfect example, I think, of the anatomy of an ism. That the way in which it gets perpetuated, it is self-perpetuating. And there is this kind of circular argument where the reason why you know that it's right is that this is the way that it's always been. The notion of it being somehow unchallenged and acceptable by everybody is proof, in fact, of its rightness. So it's very, very insidious. And as we have been discovering here, that if you really do this ism right, then the people who are most who are the greatest beneficiaries of it don't even realize that the privilege has been set up for them. We went through that exercise of asking people to identify themselves. What are the 5 things that you associate with the most? And very few, I don't think there was really anybody that came up with this idea of able-bodied being part of one's identification. And yet, everyone admitted that there was 100% of their life that's impacted by the fact that they can move, and we can see, and we can hear, and have certain dexterity and certain size. And that the reason why we don't have to perceive ourselves as able-bodied is because the entire infrastructure of society is built for people with our abilities. So we don't have to see it. So the way that privilege comes is the not being able to see it. And there is a way that, particularly with race and the construct of race, and I keep calling it a construct because that's all that it is, it's just a societal construct, that it has been constructed in such a way that the infrastructure of the societies in which it has perpetuated itself is built so that the people in it who get the most out of it can't see it any more than people with abilities can really grasp the fact that society has been made for people with our abilities. It's when you're outside, it's when you've been injured that you begin to really see, oh, you know, it's when you're wearing a cast or you don't quite have the mobility, then suddenly you see quite clearly how things have been set up for people with certain abilities that you no longer have, and you can feel that. So there's a way in which people who are outside of the system, there's a way in which people have characteristics that have not been taken into consideration, or they somehow have been deliberately excluded out of the infrastructure. They're clearer. They're clearer. In our liberal progressive society, there is this way where, in order to people to say that they're not prejudiced or they're not biased, is to brag about what they don't see. Well, I don't see you're blind. You know, I don't see people in wheelchairs. That's not what I see. I don't see race. And what that communicates is that you're so egocentric, you're so ethnocentric, that you just see yourself and project your experience out on everybody else. Like there's nothing other than what happens to me. We're in this class now, not for judgment, not for blaming, but so that we can see our privileges, and in seeing our privileges, be able to share them, be able to level the playing field. That's why we're here, to see where we are. There's no guilt, there's no shame about this. We may have very high emotions, but we can't take action if we are stuck in the guilt and shame. We've inherited a default program from our ancestors, and unless we understand what it is, we won't make any different choices. We'll just be on automatic pilot, working in the society that we're in. And this is what people don't understand. Like, well, I'm not biased, I'm not prejudiced, but we're living in a certain system, and if you don't do anything differently, you're using that system. But most of us are blind to it and they don't see it. So what we've been doing the past couple of weeks is trying to take the blinders off. Trying to take the blinders off so that we can see. Yeah. Doing. Is everybody with me?
Yes.
Okay. So, take a breath. Can you mute everybody? So you hear this argument over and over again. Why are we talking about slavery? It's over. It's done. Why does everybody keep bringing up slavery? Let's go back to this Dred Scott decision, where there is an assessment that has been done. Now, we're going to talk a little bit now about this idea of, quote unquote, the end of slavery, and see just how much we didn't end it. But this is once again about the anatomy of an ism. That just because there's a single piece of paper that says slavery has ended, mind you, a piece of paper that no slave can read, and who in the world is going to tell them about it anyway? Like, just because there's a piece of paper somewhere that somebody wrote, how does that change that whole assessment that those Supreme Court judges did about where the nation was? Listen to what I'm saying. Think about it like addiction. Just because you declare that now I'm on the path of sobriety, that doesn't change your life. Your life is whatever it was before. And you're going to have to get in there. You're going to have to do inventory. You're going to have to make amends. You're going to have to rearrange your whole life in the way that it's structured, because your life has been organized around a certain way of doing and being. Are you with me? Okay. We did nothing to change the way that society was organized or being. Whatever it was that these Supreme Court judges wrote 400 pages about all the laws and all the restrictions and all the ways in which people were being treated, none of that changed. The declaration that slavery ended did not then also say, okay, now these people of African descent can get passports, okay, now they're free to do this or free to do that, or now they can have an education, or now they can have, it didn't change. It didn't give people full rights. It just said that there won't be slaves, but it didn't do anything to shift the nation or the way in which we were configured and structured. And it is important for us to understand this because we're still doing the slavery. We're still doing it. It's just morphed. We're still doing it with migrant farm workers. We're still doing it with the way that we export our companies around the world and have slave labor, child labor in other parts of the world. We're still doing it in our prison systems. It's still all around us and still a fundamental part of our economy, but we're blind to it because we don't see it. We're blind to it because we don't see it. And what we're going to look at right now, and then we're going to get off this slavery thing and whatnot and go to some other areas, but I think it's really, really critical for us to get this and to see that even when we said we were ending slavery, we really weren't ending slavery. So what I'd like you to do is take a look at something. We're going to flash it on the screen. And you have copies, those of you who are here.
Which one?
This one page that is the Emancipation Proclamation. This one page. And there are some excerpts of it that are highlighted that are much easier to read. If you can pull up that little thing that I sent you that has the yellow.
Yes, please.
The yellow one, no, just pull it up on the with the yellow.
I need copies of that for the people in the room.
But what I'm saying is that I wasn't going to give them copies.
Oh, okay, never mind.
They're just going to look at this. Because you have a copy. This is just an excerpt of what you have in your hands. It's just blown up so you can see it. The Dred Scott decision is one of the main reasons why we had the Civil War.
Can I stop you a minute?
Yes.
Do you want this stuff or do you want the
Yes.
actual Dred Scott decision?
No, I want that. I want what you have.
Okay.
The Dred Scott decision was one of the reasons why we had the Civil War. Because what the decision said essentially was that Dred Scott was a slave. He was property. And an owner did not lose his property across state lines. So what it essentially said was that any state could have slaves. And that the new territories could be slave states as well. This was an economic issue because the substance for the economy of the United States of America was coming out of the products of the South. So the tobacco, the cotton coming out of the South was going into the northern textile mills and making the clothing, and the importing and the exporting of the and the shipments was deeply contingent upon the product, the raw product coming out from the South, being packaged and shipped through the North. So money, taxation, all of this stuff was really, really important. The South was figuring out it didn't need the North. It didn't need it. And it was attempting to do import and export on its own with Europe, and Europe was starting to recognize the South as independent. So the Union realized that the same thing was going to happen. Karma ain't nice, but the same thing was going to happen to them that happened to England. That they did to England, the Confederacy was going to do to them, which was break off, set up their own economy, but it would bankrupt the North. It would bankrupt what we know of as the Union States. So what they were trying to do was cut off these rebels by the knees. They were not trying to end slavery. Lincoln even said, if I could end this war by freeing some of the slaves and keeping the rest of the slaves enslaved, I will do that. If I can keep them all slaves, I would do that. If I have to free them all, I will do whatever I have to do to win this war. This Emancipation Proclamation was not at the beginning of the war. We keep making it sound like we fought the war to end slavery. We did not. The war was raging and raging. It was not done until a last-ditch effort. And even at that, it was signed in January 1863, but it was not released until October, until the Union started to actually win some battles. And as proof of what I am saying, you have it in front of you. You have it in front of you. So, if you look at what it says as the Emancipation Proclamation, and there is a URL that you can take a look at too. And it's explaining that all persons held as slaves with any state or designated part of a state. Because as we'll see here, it did this little gerrymandering where if one county was in rebellion, they lost their slaves, but if the county next door was not in a rebellion, they got to keep their slaves, even if they were in the same state. It was just punishment for rebellion. That's all. It's like whatever configuration declared themselves to be in rebellion. And you'll see in a moment it's named. Like they named them very, very specifically. So all persons held as slaves within any state or designated part of a state, the people whereof shall then be in rebellion against the United States, shall then and thenceforth forever be free. So if you were a slave in one of these areas that was rebelling against the United States, you were free. The executive government of the United States, including the military and the Navy authority thereof, will recognize and maintain the freedom of such persons, and will do no act or acts to repress such persons or any of them in any efforts they may make for their actual freedom. Listen to this. We're not going to go in and free you. We're not going to go in and free you. We're declaring that you are free, and we will use our military and whatnot to protect that freedom. And we're not going to stop you from anything that you might be doing to try to get your freedom. This is asking the slaves to do the dirty work. Take the risks. Take the risks. You do it. You unturn it and turn it topsy-turvy from the inside out. And our military is not going to help the slave owner anymore, which we used to do whenever the slaves were in rebellion. We would essentially send the National Guard. We're not sending the National Guard anymore to protect the slave owners. But if there's a rebellion and you start, we'll help you with the rebellion. But do you feel this? We're not going in to free you. No, no. And there's nothing that says you're a U.S. citizen or we're going to help you. Lincoln's plan was to send them back to Africa. That was Lincoln's plan, to send you back to Libya. they were trying to create this whole country to send all the slaves to. That was his plan, send them back to Africa. He had no intention of them being part of it. And then slightly after this, they allowed them to be drafted into the Union Army, but with no weapons. Do you see that movie Glory, the Denzel Washington, with no weapons, but they could be spies. They were losing the war, to come in and like help them to win the war. But it had nothing at all to do with slavery as a moral issue. So if you look at your Emancipation Proclamation document that you have, about halfway down, you see a list there. It says Arkansas, Texas. Do you see that?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, right up above that, it says, it's saying that it says, therefore, I, Abraham Lincoln, President of the United States, by virtue of the power in me vested as Commander-in-Chief of the Army and the Navy of the United States. Okay. But listen to this. Not just as the president, but by virtue of my power, this is war, of Commander-in-Chief of the United States. So I am now doing something as an act of war. Okay? In the time of actual armed rebellion against the authority and the government of the United States, and as a fit and necessary war measure for suppressing said rebellion, due on this first day of January in the year of our Lord 1863. So let me just stop right there. Do you hear that? Not morality, not this is the wrong thing, we shouldn't be doing slavery, but as an act of war. As an act of war, a necessary